Hi, welcome back to my channel. Wasa iati, how are you? I can't believe it. We're on the second video. The first thing I want to say is Gunalchish, Atling Gunalchish, thank you so much for being really supportive and as enthusiastic as I am about my first video. What I want to do today is I had this idea for a video series, a monthly video series, where I go through a genre and list out a bunch of recommendations of Indigenous written versions of those. So like today it's going to be horror. So today we're going to talk about horror recommendations by Indigenous authors. There's some that I've read, some that I have not read. So I can't actually say that they're recommendations because I've never read them. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know anything about the author, or I found them through researching this video. So that'll be exciting. It'll be a thrill. Horror can overlap with a lot of different genres like fantasy, sci-fi, apocalyptic, dystopian, whatever. I think horror can be an element of that. And so I have all these books, but you could also easily, I think, fit it into other categories. I'm doing this video for horror in September with the idea that if you wanted to, you can include this in your October reading plans and pick up any of these books, or if you already have them, make them part of your reading plans if you're looking for something a little scary for the month. So without further ado, here we go. The first book is Moon of the Crested Snow by Wabkesha Grice. This one is the prime example of what I'm talking about with books that can go across genres. So this, I would say, is solidly classified as apocalyptic fiction, but it has a lot of horrifying things and things that made my stomach turn that I would classify it as horror, and I have seen it tagged as horror. Wabkesha is an Anishinaabe author, and the synopsis for the book is, you can't see that, as one society collapses, another is reborn. With winter looming, a small northern Anishinaabe community goes dark. Cut off from power and communication with no foreseeable resolution, only very few residents truly realize the community's shortfalls. When unexpected visitors arrive, escaping the crumbling society to the south, tensions rise and allegiances are divided. The harsh winter months pass slowly and the food supply dwindles as the death toll and panic rise, but the greatest threat to the survival of the reserve might come from within the community itself. I talked about this in my first video as this being one of my favorites. It gives you a lot of feelings, and like I said, it made my stomach turn and I felt like butterflies, not the good kind, when certain characters or certain moments happened. So I would solidly recommend this as a horror option for next month. But like I said last week, if you can't read apocalyptic or pandemic fiction during the pandemic, I wouldn't recommend this. This doesn't have a pandemic, but it is very apocalyptic. What I love about this is that you don't really know what's happening. Everything happens within the community and they get cut off, and so they have no real communication with the outside world, so you don't know what's happening and you get to experience that with them and how horrifying that really is and scary, and it puts you in their place. So I recommend this. Next is Bone Black by Carol Rose Golden Eagle, who is a Cree author. This book is about a sister who goes missing, and the main character's response to what happens. It is traumatic and definitely has a lot of trigger warnings for that warning, but the way that she responds to her sister going missing and the lack of help that she gets in finding out what happened to her sister. She seeks justice on her own, and that is where I would say it has a lot of elements of horror. It can be pretty gruesome and dark. Very dark, and it just had my heart while I was reading it. I really came to care for her, and my heart broke for her. The synopsis is: there are too many stories about Indigenous women who go missing or are murdered, and it doesn't seem as though official sources such as government, police, or the courts respond in a way that works toward finding justice or even solutions. At least that is the way Wren Strong Eagle sees it. Wren is devastated when her twin sister Raven mysteriously disappears after the two spend an evening visiting at a local pub. When Wren files a missing persons report with the local police, she is dismissed and becomes convinced the case will not be properly investigated. As she follows media reports, Wren realizes that the same heartbreak she's feeling is the same for too many families, indeed for whole nations. Something within Wren snaps, and she decides to take justice into her own hands. She soon disappears into a darkness, struggling to come to terms with the type of justice she delivers. Throughout her choices, and every step along the way, Wren feels as though she is being guided. But by what? This is very dark. It's very heartbreaking. It feels, I remember feeling like it was an external manifestation of the mourning that people feel and go through every day. And it's really powerful, but also something great to read next month if you're looking for something little dark. But again, read it any time of the year. Alright, so this is Empire of Wild by Sherry Dimeline, who is a Métis author. This cover shines. This is the Canadian cover. There is also a US edition that came out this year. This one came out in the fall of last year, and I wish I'd grabbed the other cover so I could compare with you guys. Before reading, I liked the US cover better, but after reading, I actually appreciate this cover more than I did before. This one, I would say, is solidly horror. There's really great commentary in here, I think, about religion and pipelines and native land and how it affects that and how they all actually kind of come together and interweave. The synopsis is: Joan had been searching for her lost husband for 11 months and 6 days since last October, when they'd fought about selling the land she'd inherited from her father, and he'd put on his gray jacket and walked out, the screen door banging behind him. One hungover morning in a Walmart parking lot in a little town near Georgian Bay, broken-hearted Joan is drawn to a revival tent where the local Métis have been flocking to hear a charismatic preacher. By the time she staggers into the tent, the service is over, but as she is about to leave, she hears an unmistakable voice. She turns, and there is Victor. Victor's her husband. Only he insists he is not Victor, but the Reverend Eugene Wolfe, on a mission to bring his people to Jesus. And he doesn't seem to be faking. There isn't even a flicker of recognition in his eyes. With only two allies, her odd Johnny Cash-loving 12-year-old nephew Zeus, and Agene, a foul-mouthed euchre shark with a deep knowledge of the old ways, Joan sets out to remind the Reverend Wolfe who he really is. If he really is Victor, his life and the life of everyone she loves depends upon her success. Inspired by the traditional story of the Rougarou, a werewolf-like creature that haunts the roads and woods of Métis communities, Sherry Dimeline has created a propulsive, stunning, and sensuous novel. Definitely sensuous. She also has written another book, which is a young adult book. This is solidly not young adult, so I would not recommend this if that's what you're looking for, because there is, I would say, sexual content and adult content. The next author is not going to be a surprise. he has a extensive backlist of horror books, but I'm going to highlight one. But I'll show you the ones that I have, which include Night of the Mannequin, Mapping the Interior, The Only Good Indians, which I talked about last time, and then the one that I want to highlight this time is Mongrels. Stephen Graham Jones is a Blackfeet author. This one, which I read a few years ago, so I'm not going to remember all the details, it's going to be a little hazy. It's about werewolves. And I remember feeling that there was a metaphor between the werewolves as Indigenous people and the community's response to the werewolves as the response that they've had towards Indigenous people now and in the past. So I think that there are parallels that can be drawn with that. And I also think it's just a pretty good werewolf story. The synopsis: he was born an outsider like the rest of his family, poor yet resilient. He lives in the shadows with his Aunt Libby and Uncle Darren, folk who stubbornly make their way in a society that does not understand or want them. They are mongrels, mixed blood, neither this nor that. The boy at the center of Mongrels must decide if he belongs on the road with his aunt and uncle or if he fits with the people on the other side of the tracks. For 10 years, he and his family have lived a life of late-night exits and narrow escapes, always on the move across the South to stay one step ahead of the law. But the time is drawing near when Darren and Libby will finally know if their nephew is like them or not, and the close calls they've been running from for so long are catching up fast now. Everything is about to change. So, if you're looking for more Stephen Graham Jones to read, and you read all the other ones that I recommended or showed that I've read, this would be a solid next option. But I would also highly recommend any of the other ones that I showed in his backlist. I personally, now that I've read a few of his books and have come to love his books, I really want to read all of his backlist. So that is going to be my goal. Somehow I will get my hands on all those books. We'll see. It's going to take a while. When I'm telling you he has a lot of books, he has a lot of books. So that's going to be a journey. Now we're in the part where I talk about books that I have not read yet, but that I either have had on my list for a while or I actually just found about today. So I'll start with the ones that are on my list as of now, and then I'll get into the ones that I just learned about through researching this. The first one that I have is Talk to Me. I probably said that wrong. This is an anthology of Arctic horror stories. This was gifted to me by my friend Neil, who is on Instagram at Neil_Yazzie. Thank you for this, Neil. I really want to read this one. This is one that as soon as I learned about it, I was all over it. I really wanted it. Also, this cover is stunning, but I also love everything Raven because that's my clan, and also Raven is the trickster of the Tlingit people. But this is an anthology with a lot of different authors writing for it, and I have expectations that it's going to be scary. I have heard a lot of Arctic stories that are pretty horrifying just listening to. The synopsis for this one: Talk to Me is an Inuktitut word that means in the dark, and these spine-tingling horror stories by northern writers show just how dangerous darkness can be. A family clinging to survival out on the tundra after a vicious zombie virus. A door that beckons, waiting to unleash the terror behind it. A post-apocalyptic community in the far north where things aren't quite what they seem. With chilling tales from award-winning authors Richard Van Camp, Rachel and Sean Quetzalcoatl Tinsley, Aviak Johnston, and others, this collection will thrill and entertain even the most seasoned horror fan. So I'm excited about this. I would love to fit this one into October if I can. I'm already a little overwhelmed, so we'll see. But I haven't read it yet, but I wholeheartedly recommend it. Even though I haven't read it and I don't know anything about it, I've personally hyped it up for myself. The next book is also an anthology. It's called Dear Woman. It is an anthology that brings together more than a dozen Native and Indigenous women artists and illustrators to present stories of resistance, survival, empowerment, and hope. Drawing from the inspiration of traditional Dear Woman stories, Dear Woman, an anthology, will be a powerful collection of stories by Native women to bring determination and healing to those in need and those willing to listen with their hearts. This one is tagged as horror, but I actually don't know if all the stories are going to be horror stories, because it's just what these authors' responses were to writing the story. I don't have a lot to say about it because I don't know a lot about it, but I would love to read it. It's been one that I've been seeing float around that a lot of other people have loved and recommended, and one day I will read it. It'll happen. Next, I have 2 books that I had not heard about before researching this video. 2 authors I have never heard of. So that's pretty exciting. The first book is The Night Wanderer by Drew Hayden Taylor. This one is an Anishinaabe author. I don't think he's exclusively a horror author. He's written other speculative fictions. This one was tagged as a horror book with vampires. So I'm going to read the synopsis for you. A horror novel with vampires and urban fantasy. So let's do the synopsis. Nothing ever happens on the Otter Lake Reservation, but when 16-year-old Tiffany discovers her father is renting out her room, she's deeply upset. Sure, their guest is polite and keeps to himself, but he's also a little creepy. Little do Tiffany, her father, or even her astute Granny Ruth suspect the truth. The mysterious Pierre Laurent is actually a vampire returning to his tribal home after centuries spent in Europe. But Tiffany has other things on her mind. Her new boyfriend is acting weird, disputes with her father are escalating, and her estranged mother is starting a new life with somebody else. Fed up and heartsick, Tiffany threatens drastic measures and flees into the bush. There in the midnight woods, a chilling encounter with Laurent changes everything for both of them. A mesmerizing blend of gothic thriller and modern coming-of-age novel, The Night Wanderer is unlike any other vampire story. I think that sounds pretty good, and I will probably someday be picking that one up as well. The last book on the list is Crota by Owl Going Back, who is a Cherokee and Choctaw author. From my research, I learned that Owl Going Back seems to be a pretty prolific horror author from the 90s and early 2000s. This one that I chose this one out of all of his bibliography because it seemed to be the most hyped and had been the most put forward. So this one is: when the police of Hobbs County, Missouri find a mutilated man's body on the side of the road, they figure a bear attacked him, except that bears aren't indigenous to their area. The local Indian tribe offers another explanation. Crota, a giant beast of legend, has reawakened. As the body count increases, a hand-picked group of hunters stalk the mythical creature through an underground labyrinth where they will discover a horror beyond all imagining, but all too real. So those are all the horror recommendations and other authors that I had found that I am also excited to read for who write in the horror genre, or who've written something in the horror genre. I imagine there is more that I just didn't find when I was looking it up. If you know of other ones, please drop them down below. It will come as no surprise that I found quite a lot of options of Native-inspired horror books, and those are definitely ones I would not, even before reading them, I would not recommend them. I am looking for horror that's written by Native people. not appropriated from Native people. I did find a lot of those, and we don't need that. We don't need that in our life. So let me know if you're going to pick any of these books up to read next month. What are your plans? What are your TBR plans for horror? Even if it doesn't include any of these books, I would love to know your October reading plans if you know them. Next month, the genre that I will be doing is historical fiction, if all things go to plan and my plans don't change, because the month after that is November, and November has a lot going on in it in terms of being an Indigenous person. There's Thanksgiving, and it's also Native American Heritage Month, which I figured it'd be a good time to prepare if you wanted to read any historical fiction about Indigenous people in the month of November. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Suye Crested. I'll see you later.